This video will look at Kamikaze, the last in your Power and Conflict anthology. First of all, a quick look at context. AO3, you will get some marks, really crucial marks, awarded for embedding an understanding of the poet, when the poem was written and why it was written into your analysis. So first of all, a quick look at Beatrice Garland. Now, yes, we could talk about how she was awarded awards for being a great poet, but I would like to just really home in on this statement that she said about conflict. Now, Garland said that conflict is personal as well as national. Well, that really is key to this poem, because it is her really talking about how individual people and their needs clashes in war against the country and what that country needs from war as well. And it's who is right. Should we be siding with the individual or the whole country? Who should we be sympathising with? And this poem really does encourage you to find some sympathy with the individual rather than the whole country. A little bit further, well, you may be wondering, what does kamikaze mean? Well, kamikaze is a type of pilot, a pilot during World War II. It was a tactic that the Japanese would use, whereby a pilot had to go under a suicide mission to quite literally plummet their plane into a target. Now, that image on the right there might be a bit disturbing, but I think it echoes that. You've got him wearing the Japanese flag around his head, and he's already committed suicide by stepping foot into that plane. Now, what they would do is drive their planes into the likes of enemy ships and boats as well. Now, interestingly enough, when you look into kamikaze pilots, they were usually below the age of 24, and they had on average only about 40 hours of training, and they would step foot into that cockpit with hardly any knowledge of what they were doing, which really shows you the power of conflict. Now, we've got to keep looking at power and conflict, as the name is in the title really there, but why were young people being manipulated and influenced? And you could come across looking at drawing similarities with other poets like Wilfred Owen for how the government and how the country manipulates individuals into war. Now, another key contextual factor for this poem is you need to know a little bit about the Japanese culture. Well, the Japanese culture, and it still is today, honor is the backbone of its culture. To lose your honor is to quite literally lose everything that you've got. And this poem looks at how, without stepping foot in that plane, and this soldier who goes in this plane and goes backwards, he loses his honor, he loses the respect of his family, and he gets a lot of shame from that. And Garland really explores the power of that culture, that honor, that desperation to be honored, and how that power over that had over young soldiers, and how they were almost brainwashed into being a pilot for honor primarily. I had a little quick look at sort of when this poem was written, as I thought it might have been an interesting thing to look at. It's part of context as well. Well, this poem was part of the invention of fireworks, published in 2013 as well. 2013, you had a lot of conflict: Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran, Pakistan. Now, at a time of a lot of conflict, no wonder she wanted to explore some of the issues of that. But I also thought on another level, it's quite ironic. Now, the Japanese culture at that time, you may have seen Pearl Harbor the film and looked at sort of the history of that. Well, during World War II, Japan really conflicted with Western ideas and massively America. Now, isn't it quite ironic that this poem was written in 2013 at a time when the United States was involved in all of those conflicts I've listed there? Something for you to sort of consider there. And it's just to look at, for instance, linking to Emigre, where it was written at a time where a lot of conflicts in 1993 as well. And you've got the same in this poem here. Right, you also need to really just keep it simple when you're looking at each of these poems. Try and think of it about power and conflict. Now, I've just got up here on the screen for you some ways for you to view this poem. Look at it as power of culture. Garland's encouraging you to see how powerful culture can be, manipulating young soldiers. I told you before that they were likely to be below the age of 24, stepping in foot of that plane. Power of nature, huge in this poem. You could link it then to extract from the prelude, for instance, or exposure. There's a lot of natural imagery dominating this poem and positive images of nature. And it's the beauty of the nature that has power over the pilot. You've also got power of place. This pilot ends up not plummeting his plane into the sea or into his target, because it's the power of remembering his home that draws him back, and homesickness, and also memories of being a child pull him back. There's also, let's move away from power and look more at conflict. There's a conflict between him and honor. Should he kill himself for honor? Which is more important? There's also a conflict between his family and himself. You see how his family reject him, and he's left feeling very isolated from them. Okay, it's really important for you to understand the structure and form of this poem. So you may have seen this on several other videos, but it's very simple. It's nice and easy. But basically, there are 7 regular stanzas. Every stanza has the same amount of lines, really to reflect the strict control of the Japanese military over him. And how he was trying, actually, you could see it in a different way, to be really controlled in that cockpit, to live up to that expectation of being strong and doing the job. But when you dig deep into the poem, it might look really tight-knit and controlled on the outside. Dig into it, and you'll find a lot of enjambment, which means each of the line will just carry on and flow and spill into the next one. And you'll find free verse, so no rhyming. So why have we got a really strict, tight, neatly looking thing, but inside it's a mess? Well, it shows how out of control he is. He's trying to be controlled on the outside, but he isn't on the inside. The enjambment could also really simply just show you the chaos of the flight, how the plane journey will be quite turbulent. How also you may want to see it as freedom. He is going against what was expected. He's going against that strict control. He's defying the traditions and the expectations to go and put that plane into his target. You may also think that the free verse, the no rhyming, shows the seriousness of the topic. You could almost think of rhyming being quite playful and childlike. Well, there's no rhyming to show that because it's a serious topic of death. But you may just simply want to state that the regular stanzas look tight and neat to show the control of the military, but he actually is out of control and getting free from it. Right, so I'm going to go through stanza by stanza very quickly for you, but I'd like you to make sure that when you are doing this, that you think of your own ideas, don't just go by mine. Right, her father embarked at sunrise with a flask of water, a samurai sword, and the cockpit, a shaven head full of powerful incantations, and enough fuel for a one-way journey into history. Embarked. Now, that powerful verb there, it sounds quite adventurous. Starts the poem in quite a positive tone. It's almost like he accepted it. He was happy. He agreed to go onto that flight. Why positive? Well, maybe because that is how he felt at the beginning. He was manipulated to feel like it was the positive thing to do. I quite like all this listing. You've got asyndetic listing, flask of water, comma, samurai sword, comma, in the cockpit, comma. That means there are no ands or buts, and the listing, the constant listing, could sort of show how he was trying to be controlled, a bit like how you might leave the house checking right keys, phone, wallet. He's got everything ordered and organised. Notice shaven head. Now, I thought that was really quite striking. Shaven, you think of people maybe having their hair shaved as a way to strip their identity, how the power of the military stripping him of his identity. I also think it links to how it's sharp. If you touch a shaven head, it is sharp. Bit like the blackthorns of the sharp image you have in poppies, how soldiers are untouchable and war makes them sharp and untouchable. His head is full of powerful incantations. Now, that means, basically, that's full of chants and charms, almost like the mind-numbing feeling of saying something over and over again. He was manipulated. There's that idea again of the power of conflict manipulating him. His mind has been brainwashed to get in that plane, do his duty, and sacrifice his life. He's only got a one-way journey into history. That last bit, journey into history, it's a metaphor. He's going to make a journey into history books. Why have that on its own? Why not just have a journey into history in one big line? Well, maybe so he can separate himself from the idea of committing suicide. One way has been separated from journey into history because he doesn't want to think about the fact he's going one way. He's going to separate that and just think on its own about how he's going to do something historical amazing. But halfway there, she thought, recounting it later to her children, he must have looked far down at the little fishing boats strung out like bunting on a green-blue translucent sea. Okay, who's she? You're probably wondering. Now, this poem is about a a woman who was talking about her father to her children, all right? So she is telling it to her children. She's telling a story of what her father went through. Now let's have a little look at what I've highlighted. But you've got this fronted disjunction. It suddenly shifts the tone. It's the moment he stops halfway through the flight and thinks, am I doing the right thing? She thought, there's an embedded clause here. We've got, like I've just said, we learn now it's from a daughter's perspective. Now, why does she think she does not know properly? She thought, she's not certain, she thought maybe. Did her father never tell her the exact details? Why was he embarrassed what he didn't do? And there's a very important, that's why I've got the image of the bunting behind you, image of the little fishing boats. He's flying above and he looks down, he sees these little fishing boats strung out like bunting. Now you think of bunting as being something quite happy, you might have it at a party. You may also have bunting of flags. It's quite a patriotic, and by that I mean a thing where you love your country type of thing to do. Now when he looks down, all these little fishing boats are strung out like bunting. Now, bunting will have been put out particularly in war, to celebrate your country. You would have had flags on your bunting. So it shows, for me, I think, that he is thinking about how he'll be celebrated for dying. That image, he's flying and thinking, right, okay, I'm going to be celebrated. He's trying to remember what he's doing. We'll get him some celebration. Also, little fishing boats. When he looks down at the little fishing boats, why have little? Why not just be fishing boats? Little has that little happy connotation carried there. So he's thinking about the normality of all these lovely little fishing boats below him and thinking, what am I doing? Green, blue, translucent sea. Now, I said before that there's a lot of natural imagery, a lot of nature in this. Now, there's some really calming colours there, green and blue, and translucent. That means you can see through it. It's clear. Maybe, if you think about it, it could be that the sea is making him see clearly now. He has been influenced by nature. He's thinking, what am I doing? He's been made to feel really small by nature and realise he doesn't need to do this. Now, beneath the fishing boats, beneath them, arcing in swaths like a huge flag waved first one way, then the other in a figure of 8, the dark shoals of fishes flashing silver their bellies swiveled towards the sun. So beneath the fishing boats, there's loads of fish waving in and out, moving in and out, like a huge flag. Again, another simile comparing something to something that's celebratory. A flag, something that you would use to celebrate. He's thinking again of honour. He's thinking and been stamped on his mind about his culture. He can't escape it. It shows you again the power of culture bringing him back. You may have noticed already before I spot it for you, a lot of sibilants, shoals, fishes flashing towards the sun. I'll discuss that in a minute, but first of all, I'm going to look at the fact there are shoals of fishes. Now, shoals just means a group of fish, like in the image behind there. And he can see all these massive amounts of fish moving around, and it's that verb flashing that's important. Why are they flashing silver? Why use that verb? Why did Garland deliberately use that one? Well, I think it reflects how he's being blinded by nature's beauty. The power of nature, again, seeping through this poem. Now, the sibilants, I'm sure you're excited. He's used sibilants here. Well, she has used sibilants here for several effects, and I don't want you to just think of one. Everyone always thinks of it as just evil, something evil, but it's not always. I think it could be the sound of the plane moving through the air to remind you that he is still in this plane. Is he going to do it or not? A bit of tension. It could be the breathlessness, that he's taken aback by it all. Bit like how there is hardly any punctuation across those lines when he's looking at the fish, a bit like he's stopped and he's completely overwhelmed. So the sounds are his breath being pulled in. He's so sort of captivated by it all. Towards the sun. I think this is important. Why are the fish always all looking, having their bellies towards the sun? Well, maybe it's an image of worshipping the sun, to remind us maybe to worship nature over man, over war. Again, you could look at it at the power of nature there. Okay, so he sees the fish, he sees the boats, he's still in this plane. Is he going to do it? Well, now he suddenly has a sort of a flashback memory. And he remembered how he and his brothers, waiting on the shore, built cairns of pale grey pebbles to see who's withstood longest the turbulent inrush of breakers bringing their father's boat safe. Very simply, he remembers being a little boy by the shore